Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Franco with Frank Analysis. Here to talk to you guys about the music industry. A lot of information is being exposed now about a lot of the questionable things that some of these artists and CEOs of these record companies are doing, right? It's kind of similar based on the stories that we're hearing, right, with Diddy. It's similar to like what was getting exposed with Epstein. And from what I'm seeing, I am seeing like a connection, right? Like we see people like famous celebrities, actors, musicians, like artists, how they were on Epstein's flight log list. So I think there's definitely a connection there. But we're gonna dive into some of the stuff that I've been finding. What's up, Luna? Good to see you. Um, so yeah, let me share with you guys some stuff. In case you guys didn't know, I have a TikTok. So I'm going to share the link right now in the chat. I posted a few things on there already. Some of the stuff is talking about what we're going to discuss here, like just going more in depth, like with the Diddy stuff. Some of that stuff, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, we've discussed on this show before with guests such as John Potash, who was the author of these two books right here that I'm going to share with you guys. And I'm seeing a connection with what was seen in these two books, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, and the FBI's war on Tupac Shakur. If we look at who invests in the music industry, they're billionaires, right? Or even richer than that. Of course, they're going to have political intentions. If there's going to be people like artists that are putting a lot of conscious and politically aware messages in their songs, that will go against their profit motives, right? They don't want people to become aware of how the government and the corporations are effing them over. So they would rather have artists who push out music that is very surface level, like talking about partying, talking about consuming drugs, but glamorizing it. There is some good music out there that talks about the dangers of drugs or paints the reality of how, when you take drugs, like how terrible that can be. But I'm talking about music that glamorizes that lifestyle. So in case you guys didn't know, I have this article up here about what's going on with P. Diddy. What are the allegations made against Sean Diddy Combs? So they raided his home. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about that because it's just was all over the news. Federal agents with U.S. Homeland Security raided two of the rapper's houses in Los Angeles and Miami as he faces a string of accusations. So they're accusing him of sex trafficking and sexual abuse and rape. So over here, the allegations of the lawsuit against the rapper began on November 16th, 2023, when he was sued by singer and dancer Cassie, his former partner, who alleged years of abuse. It was filed under the New York Adult Survivors Act just before it expired. This act offered a 1-year window for adult victims of sexual assault to come forward with civil claims, regardless of the statute of limitations. So Cassandra Casey Ventura, who's an R&B singer, filed a lawsuit in 2023 alleging that she was trafficked, raped, and beaten by Combs on many occasions over 10 years. Her lawsuit claimed that Combs brought the singer to his ostentatious, fast-paced, and drug-fueled lifestyle. Not long after she met him, and signed her to his label in 2005 when she was just 19 and he was 37. So I'm seeing a lot of patterns here of very successful artists or people who are in the music industry, like P. Diddy and Jay-Z, who get into these relationships with women who are far younger than them, right? Jay-Z was attracted to Aaliyah back when she was 15 years old in the 90s. And he has a big age difference with Beyonce as well. But I hear a lot of different stories like this about very successful artists like this who get into relationships with women who are far younger than them. All right. So Rodney Lil Rod Jones. So in the most recent lawsuit against Combs filed on February 26, 2024 in New York, producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones alleged he was subject to unwanted advances by Diddy at his direction and that he was forced to engage in relations with sex workers Combs had hired. The producer who worked for Combs between September 2022 and November 2023 claimed Combs sexually harassed, drugged, and threatened him for more than a year. So this is just what was going on recently. He's been around, Combs has been around for a very long time. He said he has video and audio evidence of Combs, his staff, and others engaging in serious illegal activity. The lawsuit identified rapper 50 Cent's former girlfriend and the mother of one of his children, Daphne Joy, as one of the alleged sex workers. And Luna put up here, 50 Cent's Instagram has been pretty crazy. So he's been putting up some pretty crazy stuff. What's going on, Ronwell? It's good to see you. I remember Jay beefing with Damon Dash over Aaliyah. Yeah, it's crazy. They're both much older than Aaliyah. But I'm just seeing these patterns, of these artists who are far older dating these younger women. And again, he's been around for a long time, since the 90s. This has been going on for a while, I believe, from what we're seeing here. And then it lists other people like Joy Dickerson Neal, who's filing a lawsuit alleging that Combs drugged her, sexually assaulted her, and secretly recorded the assault while she was a college student in 1991. More women come forward. Anonymous plaintiff, unnamed accuser Jane Doe. And then his response to the allegation, he was strongly denying all the accusations against him. He vowed to fight for my name, quote unquote, my family, and for the truth. In a statement in December following the lawsuit brought by Jane Doe, he called the claims sickening and said his accusers were looking for a quick payday. I mean, what we're seeing is a lot of evidence coming to light, guys. But I'm gonna get back to this. I do see a connection between what was in this book right here. Again, I'm interviewing the author right here in this video that I'm showing you guys, and this book right here by the same guy. All right, but I came across this video. Shout out to Ricky Rance. He posted this video. This is a TikTok. And I found the guy's TikTok account. It's Beauty Marked. All right. He's been posting a lot of very informative stuff about the music industry. All right. And its ties to politics, political figures and BlackRock. But I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick. I want to make sure I'm sharing the volume.
What if I told you that P. Diddy is just a pawn in a greater scheme? And stay with me through the course of this video because I'm about to open everybody's eyes to a lot of shit. In my last video, I mentioned somebody by the name of Sir Lucian Grange, somebody that's been rumored to sponsor these specific parties as to where these allegations are originating from. But what if I told you it goes way beyond this man in Universal Music Group? And when I say way beyond, I mean way beyond. His name is Leora Cohen. He's the head of music and YouTube and former CEO of Warner Music Group, okay? You know, the guy from a couple years ago that was accused of creating gangster rap to fill private prisons by glamorizing criminality? John Homestead, a retired CIA agent a couple years ago, admitted that the CIA was behind the creation of gangster rap in the late 80s and 90s in order to glamorize criminal behavior and fill private prisons.
Another thing that was gone over in this book as well. All right, and Tupac was actually trying to make peace deals, and he did, between the Bloods and the Crips. And if people who are in gangs who resort to this because of the systems that we have in place, if they are politicized and become more politically aware and are not focusing their energy on fighting each other and instead are uniting with each other, focusing their energy on uniting and educating the masses, well, that's not going to do really well for the profits of the prison industrial complex, which is also tied to these investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. But yeah, let's continue.
Something that not only Tupac spoke about back in the 90s, but also Kanye in modern day. Do keep in mind, before I go any further, this is for entertainment purposes only, okay? But the former CIA agent said that the CIA worked in tandem with music industry elite to create a funnel in which young people will be indoctrinated with brainwashing gangster rap music, introduced to a life of crime, and then delivered to the highly profitable private prison system. And this just so coincidentally took off right after Jay-Z was released from prison back in the 90s. Not saying those two things add up in any way, but boy, is that ironic. He also said that some of the biggest names in the music industry are in cahoots with private prison owners, and stating that back in 2021, CoreCivic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America, the biggest name in the private prisons industry, contacted 48 states offering to buy their prisons. And supposedly there was one requirement of eligibility for the deal that was particularly strange: an assurance by the agency partner that the agency has sufficient inmate population to maintain a 90% occupancy rate over the term of the contract. Supposedly, back in the year 2012, a mere 232 media executives in the U.S. were responsible for controlling all revenues necessary to manufacture for any celebrity and spark any trend. Time Warner, as the owner of Warner Brothers Records, can not only sign an artist, but since they are also the owners of Entertainment Weekly, they can also put an artist on the cover of magazines by next week. Here's the kicker: BET and MTV are owned by Viacom, right? But here's the thing: when ownership of these mass media conglomerates is cross-checked with the biggest names of private prison ownership, things start to get really fishy and sketchy. The largest owner of CoreCivic, formerly Corrections Corporations of America, is Vanguard Group Incorporated. Vanguard is the #1 largest holder in both Viacom and Time Warner. Vanguard is also the largest holder in the GEO Group, the second largest owner of private prisons in the entire USA. Vanguard! God, I hope I don't get targeted by the CIA or some shit for this fucking video. But you gotta bring awareness! And you know how I told you about Leora Cohen, right? You know, the former CEO of Warner Music Group, the head of music and YouTube? Well, check this photo out. Oh, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? And a music industry executive who was present at the first meeting between the CIA, private prison, and the music industry executives has written a confessional letter detailing exactly what went down on that fateful day. The video has since been deleted. Leora Cohen also joined Google at the end of 2016, having previously acted as the CEO of 300 Entertainment, people. Prior to taking his position at YouTube, though, Cohen worked on the label side of the music industry at companies including Warner Music, like I spoke about, Def Jam, people, Island Def Jam, and 300 Entertainment that I just spoke about. And in his early career, he also gained artist management experience at Def Jam's sister company, Rush Management. Leora Cohen started his career in the music industry supposedly as a manager at the Russell Simmons founded Rush Management. During his first day with the company, he was famously selected to replace Run DMC's missing tour manager. He continued working as a road manager for Run DMC and the Beastie Boys from 1984 to 1987. Cohen stayed with Rush as a manager until 1994, running the company's day-to-day operations and advising such acts as Run DMC, LL fucking Cool J, and Public Enemy. Cohen personally signed artists including A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, EPMD, Eric B., Rakim, and Slick Rick. And while still working at Rush Management in 1988, Cohen began his move to the label side of the music business by joining Simmons at Def Jam. He shortly became partners with Simmons, negotiating the label separation from his distributor, Sony. In 1994, the pair negotiated a new distribution deal with Polygram, which was eventually acquired by Universal. Boy, it really makes you wonder what happened to Tupac, right?
Mhm.
That man was taking absolutely nobody's shit. But in 1998 and 1999, after the events of which we all know that happened, Cohen brokered the deal to sell Def Jam to Universal, creating the Island Def Jam Music Group, which combined Def Jam, Mercury, and Island Records. And as official president of Island Def Jam then, Cohen was responsible for labels including Rockefeller people, American Records, and Roadrunner Records. Oh, this shit gets deep. Artists under his watch at Island Def Jam included Jay-Z, Bon Jovi, Ludacris, Mariah Carey, and a whole bunch more. And in 2004, Cohen just so happened to be recruited by Warner Music Group and became the CEO and president of recorded music at WMG. He would eventually become chairman of WMG, thus being responsible for all worldwide recording music, including but not limited to Atlantic Records Group, newly founded after the merger of Atlantic Records and Elektra Records, and Warner Bros. Records. He was also in charge of marketing, sales, distribution, catalog marketing, and the digital music business. Cohen is also credited with preparing the label for the music consumption changes due to streaming. And he signed an unprecedented deal with YouTube in 2006 that allowed the site to show videos from Warner's talent roster in exchange for a share of YouTube's revenue. And TikTok wasn't providing any revenue, Kind of makes sense as to why they parted ways, But he left WMG in 2012, co-founding 300 Entertainment with his former Warner Bros. Music and Def Jam colleague Kevin Liles. 300 Entertainment has found success with their past and current sightings, including Migos, Megan Thee Stallion, and YSL Records with Young Thug, Gunna, etc. And he remained in the active role with the company until the end of 2016. It was at the end of 2016 when Lyor Cohen was announced as YouTube's global head of music, thus putting Sir Lucian Grange in charge of Universal Music. So God, that ladder really goes up pretty high, doesn't it? But yeah, let's just put all the blame on Diddy, right? There is always a pawn in a bigger chess game, okay? And this chess game evidently should have been folded up back in the 80s. But I guess everybody just loves money, don't they? All I'm going to say after presenting all this is that this goes way above my safety pay grade. But just know, if you thought you had it figured out, you definitely did not have it figured out. I mean, this shit runs deep. It runs deep.
Yeah, exactly. Like it goes like this is not like Diddy is not a mastermind. Like how a lot of people are, from what I'm seeing, the majority of people think that this is just like an isolated incident in which Diddy is some like master supervillain who was able to get away with all this. No, like I go over this in like one of the TikToks. Like if we're seeing in the court documents that Lucian Grange of Universal Music Group is involved as an accomplice here, somebody who is a huge billionaire, like, and we see that billionaires were involved with like the Epstein stuff, like Bill Gates, for example. This, like, they know what's going on, right? And what I think is that when more information is being leaked about this stuff, they choose certain scapegoats. Like, for example, Diddy was probably being way too sloppy. Like people were pulling up old footage of him like talking to Justin Bieber, acting all creepy to him, saying like, why aren't you texting me anymore, and all this other crap, and talking about how he's like his guardian. I'm sure some of you guys have seen that video, right? If not, then let me know in the chat and I can pull it up. But Diddy was just being so sloppy. More people were looking into him, and since people were filing lawsuits against him, they chose to use him as a scapegoat and be like, all right, just focus on him. But thankfully, we're in the age of Aquarius now, and people are actually like asking really good questions and going down the rabbit hole. But I think that the goal should be to have more people be aware about this stuff. Like it really needs to be exposed, and it's all tied to how our current system in the US is and how our current system in the rest of the world is, because this stuff expands outward. These people are like, they're supportive of Israel, like they're Zionists, right? They profit off of that. They profit off of war, just like they profit off of the suffering that happens here with lowering and keeping wages low, with the prison industrial complex. Again, let me share this guy's like TikTok right here. I posted a link in the chat. It's at Beauty Mark. And I'm going to share you guys some of the stuff that I've been posting on my TikTok. All right. So this stuff, this right here, and this one, which like got shadow banned, they're about elections. But I'm going to pull this one up because it has to do with what we're talking about here.
Which was eventually acquired by Universal. Boy, it really makes you wonder what happened to Tupac, right?
100% yes. Following the raid, the DHS raid on Diddy's home, people need to realize that this goes a lot deeper than just Diddy. Just like how with Jeffrey Epstein, it goes a lot deeper than just Epstein, but that's a relevant story for another day. People need to understand that Tupac Shakur was the son of a key Black Panther Party member, his mom, and he was trying to politicize people through his music. If you watch some of his old clips of his speeches, you will see Tupac was really political. You can see it in some of his lyrics. And he was he was a key figure in setting up peace deals between the Bloods and the Crips. And that would go against the profits of the prison industrial complex, which in that video that I stitched here, the guy was going over how they wanted to push gangster rap so that they can have more people in the prison system to profit off of that. There were unalived attempts against Tupac when he was in Atlanta, Georgia in 91. Then again, it happened in 94 when he was in New York, when he was hanging out with B.I.G. Then they try to pit Tupac and B.I.G. against each other. And then they tried to make it seem like the assassination that happened against Tupac in Las Vegas was because of this East Coast, West Coast beef. But the truth is because they saw Tupac as a threat, and then they unalived Biggie to make it look like it was because of the beef between East Coast, West Coast. And who was Biggie's manager? Yep. So when Tupac got out of prison, that's when he was in Death Row Records with Suge Knight, who has ties to intelligence as well. And that's why his album All Eyes on Me was mainly about being a gangster, about partying. And then with his Machiavelli album, he went back to his political roots. You have speeches by Malcolm X sampled in his album Machiavelli, The 7-Day Theory. And so because he was starting to distance himself away from that gangster life persona and going back into the political aspects of himself, they saw that as a threat. And it goes way deeper than just hip hop. There's plenty of other artists. This goes back decades. All right. How there's agents that come into the lives of some of these artists like Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon. And then a lot of questions are raised when they're unalived. I can talk about this more in other TikToks.
Which was eventually acquired by Universal. Boy, it really makes you wonder what happened to Tupac, right?
All right. So I had another TikTok that got posted where I mentioned Jimi Hendrix, how he had a manager named Michael Jeffrey. And I'm just going to pull this up here so that you guys know, so I can actually show you guys evidence. But Michael Jeffrey was mentioned in this book here, this one where I interviewed the author. But we can pull up the Wikipedia here and then see what it says here. Okay, so it doesn't have the keyword that I was looking for. So I'm just going to show you guys like what it says on the Wikipedia page. But again, like with Wikipedia, we've talked on this channel like a few years ago about how it's like it censors certain information, like it keeps certain information out. What's up, Extra Bola? Good to see you here. So Hendricks' death allegation. Hendricks was pronounced dead on September 18th, 1970 at St. Mary Abbott's Hospital, Kingston, London. In May 2009, the UK media reported claims by James Tappy Wright that Jeffrey had done this to him. Wright, who was a roadie for the animals, and I'm going to zoom in here because it just looks so little for you guys. One more percentage. Where were we at? Wright, who was a roadie for the animals in the 1960s, had just written a book in which he claimed he was with Jeffrey in 1971. 1 year after Hendrix's death, and Jeffrey confessed to having murdered Hendrix by plying him with pills and a bottle of wine in order to kill him and claim on the guitarist's life insurance. At the time of Hendrix's death, the coroner recorded an open verdict stating that the cause was barbiturate intoxication and inhalation of vomit. The pathologist who did the autopsy on Hendrix, Donald Thierry, reported a low blood alcohol level. Jimi Hendrix was not murdered, said Bob Levine, who was the U.S. manager of the late guitarist at the time of his death in 1970. Despite the allegations that have recently been made, I need to set the record straight once and for all. Jimi died an accidental death, but he definitely wasn't murdered, not by Michael Jeffrey, his UK manager, and certainly not by anybody connected to him. The whole thing is a giant lie. So that's like what Wikipedia says. Now, in the book, I'm just going to look for the chapter that talks about it. So bear with me while I look for it. All right, so the book talks about how Michael Jeffrey was a former MI6 agent. So Jeffrey controlled Jimi Hendrix in other key ways. So this is on page 200 of the book. All right. Controlled Jimi Hendrix in other key ways besides just trying to keep Hendrix from participating in any political activism. Jeffrey created a concert schedule that had Hendrix crisscrossing the country from one concert to the next, leaving him exhausted with jet lag. This helped Jeffrey and others around Hendrix to more easily manipulate him and push drugs on him. When Jimi Hendrix finally fired the former MI6 agent, Hendrix was dead within 48 hours. So within 48 hours after firing him, Hendrix was unalived. Rumors still swirl about the manner of Hendrix's death, and none of the accounts are completely consistent. Monica Daneman reported that on September 17th, 1971, the day after Hendrix finally fired Jeffrey, she found her fiancé unconscious in their London apartment bed before noon. Hendrix had been at a party the night before where people had given him pills. He showed her the handful, then flushed them down the toilet. Unable to sleep, he took multiple doses of Vesperex sleeping pills. The next morning, she went out briefly and came back to find Hendrix unresponsive. Daneman called an ambulance. Hendrix died either before arriving at the hospital or an hour after, according to differing reports. While biographers Shapiro and Glebek found some discrepancy within Daneman's account of Hendrix's last 24 hours, most of their eyewitness reports backed Daneman's general description. So again, this is all documented. Right? He cites his sources, the author. The coroner reported that what Hendrix had in him, a non-fatal dose of sleeping tablets, a small amount of alcohol, a trace of barbiturate seconal, and 20 milligram of amphetamine, shouldn't have killed him. So the official cause of death was described by one source as possibly being inhalation of vomit due to barbiturate intoxication. It is likely that at the party, someone spiked Hendrix's drink with the amphetamine and possibly the seconal found in his system. Monica Dannemann's memoir and Shapiro and Glabek's biography describe how official foul play was rife after Hendrix's death. Dannemann said that when police investigated her place, they failed to take anything and warned her not to not say anything about the death. An official British inquest resulted in the London coroner and the inquest members declaring an open, inconclusive verdict on Hendrix's death. The inquest called only 3 witnesses to testify: Dannemann, Hendrix's road manager, and the coroner. They failed to have the ambulance workers, the people Hendrix saw at the party, or the hospital doctors testify. Additionally, when Dannemann traveled with the reporters to whom she could give her opinions about Hendrix's last 24 hours and officials' foul play thereafter, someone damaged Dannemann's thinking and communication by dosing her with LSD. Police also presented false information on Hendrix, backing up erroneous media reports that Hendrix was suicidal and used drugs heavily. After his death, press accounts described Jimi Hendrix as an overdosing wild man and a violent, hard-drinking, drugged-up sex maniac. Police said that on the night he died, Hendrix left a message on the answering machine of his friend and former manager, Chas Chandler, in which he said, "Help me, man." Chandler said he didn't own an answering machine. Later on, Monica Dannemann came upon new and disturbing evidence. The coroner also found an unidentifiable compound in Hendrix's body. Well-respected doctors told Dannemann that because the coroner waited several days to do Hendrix's autopsy, any poisons in his system might not have been in a detectable state. In 1975, the magazine Crawdaddy investigated and concluded that a death squad of undercover intelligence agents killed Hendrix. Whoa. While that magazine's sources aren't known, the 1992 England's Attorney General ordered an inquiry. Scotland Yard also re-examined the case, but failed to conclude that foul play occurred. Dannemann, Shapiro, and Glabek easily contradicted Scotland Yard, exposing their cover-up and contradictory evidence. Scotland Yard claimed to quote Hendrix's attending doctor, Dr. John Bannister, saying Hendrix was dead on arrival, dying, in the ambulance or at home. The ambulance workers denied this. The hospital's official report had Hendrix's hospital arrival at 11:45 a.m. and pronounced dead at 12:45 p.m. Dannemann claimed Hendrix was alive when the ambulance workers took him from the apartment. Whether or not Hendrix was dead on arrival, what happened during that hour, Scotland Yard didn't or couldn't give Dannemann an answer. When she asked what Dr. Bannister had to say about it, Scotland Yard told her he had been struck off England's official medical register of all doctors in the country without any further explanation. Mike Jeffrey, again, Jimi Hendrix's manager, who he fired, confiscated all of Hendrix's recordings and belongings in his New York studio. It took 25 years for Al Hendrix to gain the rights to his son's music from Warner Records. Warner Records, which was mentioned in Beauty Marked, his TikTok. On albums and memorabilia, Warner Records made over $100 million in sales, while Al Hendrix was only given $2 million. As happened in other targeted musicians' deaths, several close to Jimi Hendrix died in uncertain ways after him. Close friend Devin Wilson last saw Hendrix at the party the night before he died. Months later, she died of a reported overdose, but friends who saw the scene of her death said it looked like a violent murder. Several people sued Mike Jeffrey for money he owed them. A judge allowed Jeffrey to travel for business during the trial, and he reportedly died in a plane crash in 1973. Because a witness only saw Jeffrey's jewelry to identify him, some believe he escaped with the shell company fortunes he amassed. Jeffrey created his tax haven shell with the same Bahamas institutions that worked earlier with William Malone Hitchcock and later with George H.W. Bush's CIA in the BCCI/Iran-Contra scandal. Another Hendricks-linked death occurred much later. Monica Dannemann said Jeffrey threatened to kill her if she published the memoir about Hendricks she wrote in 1971. She said she lost her book manuscript twice in 1971 and 1973. First to a thief she believed Jeffrey sent, and then to a Jeffrey associate. In 1995, she finally published a book about Hendricks's activist political plans, Jeffrey sabotage, and government cover-up. News reports and Dannemann killed herself in 1996. Her close friends believed she was murdered. They said Dannemann received death threats over the years and had just finished a long interview for a film on Hendricks. In 2009, new information came to light regarding Mike Jeffrey's work on behalf of British and U.S. intelligence in the orchestration of Jimi Hendrix's murder. One of Jimi Hendrix's roadies, James Tappy Wright, published a memoir, Rock Roadie. Wright claimed that Mike Jeffrey made a drunken confession in Wright's apartment one night in 1971. Wright said Jeffrey confessed to having Hendrix murdered. The emergency group doctor, John Bannister, also said that after examining Hendrix, it was plausible that Hendrix was murdered. Police investigating Hendrix's death failed to investigate Mike Jeffrey, despite Hendrix's lawyer, Henry Steingarten, and Monica Dannemann knowing that Hendrix had just fired him. While it's widely reported Jeffrey formerly worked for MI6, a London Times reporter also wrote that Jeffrey flaunted his connections with organized crime and the FBI. That's according to the book, okay? You guys can make up your minds with whatever you want based on that, all that information and whatever other information you guys come across. But that was just one story, all right? The book talks about Kurt Cobain, talks about Tupac, and it goes more into depth about that in this book and in the interview that I had with John Potash. It even talks about Robert Kennedy. It talks about John Lennon. It talks about Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. And there was also like a lot of weird connections too with some artists having a very similar background to each other, such as the Mamas and the Papas. I don't know if you guys know about these artists from the 1960s, but the Mamas and the Papas, what's the guy from the Doors name? It's slipping my mind right now, but there's also Frank Zappa. A lot of them would have like these parties in this one place called Laurel Canyon. So this book goes into depth about that. And at these parties, what's his name? Charles Manson would attend them, which is really weird. But a lot of different artists would come here to these parties, like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. However, members of bands like the Byrds, and I'm reading like the back here, the description of the Byrds, the Doors, Buffalo Springfield, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Turtles, the Eagles, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Frank Zappa, and the Mothers of Invention, Steppenwolf, CSN, Three Dog Night, and Love, along with such singer-songwriters as Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, James Taylor, and Carole King. They all lived together and jammed together in the bucolic community nestled in the Hollywood Hills. Many didn't make it out alive, the description goes on to say, and many deaths remain shrouded in mystery to this day. Far more integrated into the scene than most would like to admit was a guy by the name of Charles Manson, along with his murderous entourage. also floating about the periphery were various political operatives, up and coming politicians and intelligence personnel, the same sort of people who gave birth to many of the rock stars populating the canyon. It's just really weird. Rock stars, hippies, murderers, and politicians all happily coexisting in this military installation. I mean, I'm just giving you guys this information here. Like, I'm not like promoting any theories or anything. We can make of all that what we will. Like, and I'm using all that to question, like, why is it that a lot of very politically influential artists, like, they don't make it, they don't have a very long life. I'm just like questioning that, and I'm also questioning why they're okay with certain artists that they have now, which focus mainly on like party music, singing or rapping about drugs. Jeremy Jenkins says that the hippie musicians were supposedly all military brats. That's what the book talks about. Extra Bullet says, I'm sure Manson was used to help kill the hippie movement. Yeah, I think so too. Like, this book, as well as this one right here. So this one and this one talk about how, like, it felt like really manufactured how a lot of these drugs were brought into the scene, like LSD, and how there's also like scientific evidence to show how this pacified some of the, how it would pacify people and also affect their critical thinking skills. So I'm thinking that played a part in how the hippie movement, that was all about peace and ending the war, the Vietnam War, and ending all wars, how it like died down. And now we have like all like, they've grown up. Some of them who are still living are like now like boomers who support Democrats or and other politicians like that. So where were we at? I'm gonna show you guys some of my other stuff.
Yo, this man is a fuck.
Diddy is not a boss level supervillain. Hang on, can you guys hear that? I just want to make sure you guys are hearing all that. There we go.
Yo, this man is a fuck.
Diddy is not a boss level supervillain. It's more accurate to say that he is a henchman or a pawn. This right here is Lucian Charles Grange. He is the CEO of Universal Music Group. And I'm not saying that he is the boss level supervillain either. Although he is a villain, he's just a step above P. Diddy. He's more rich than him. He has more power than him. But there are people who have even more power than that. But just focusing on Grange real quick, he was named as an accomplice in the S trafficking lawsuit against Diddy. You know, all this sounds familiar, like typical billionaire activity, right? What we must understand is that Diddy and Epstein are like pawns. There are more powerful people out there that try to control the population through the entertainment industry. Suge Knight was another pawn. And you think that these record companies don't know what's going on? And do you think that these investors, these people that invest in the entertainment industry, that they don't know what's going on? These people are billionaires. Some of them are even richer than that. They know what's going on. The three-letter agencies know what's going on. But because information is starting to get out, they have to use scapegoats. And that's what they're doing to Diddy right now, is that they're using him as a scapegoat. All right. So I mentioned Suge Knight. Is this from a documentary? Oh, I'm not even sharing that. Let me pull up that specific tab. Suge Knight, if you don't know, he was at the head of Death Row Records in the 1990s. This was this is where Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, Tupac fell under this umbrella in 1995, 94, 95, 96. All right, so I'm just going to get to this part real quick. All right, so they're going to talk to this officer who was looking into the case of what happened to Biggie and Tupac.
Talk too much to get your spot blown. Now you're no longer just a face in the crowd.
Tell Leo
now follows developments with a case on his computer.
Is he one of your favorites?
Yeah, I do like Elvis.
Russell was an apple pie, all-American kind of cop. His father, an ex-Marine and ex-sheriff, was his hero and role model. Russell is one of those cops who says he bleeds blue. He's an old-school type of cop.
So it's great we were able to do this finally.
Yeah, well, don't tell Leo. Would you get that on? Leo will be pissed.
And do you think that there was a connection between the Tupac Shakur killing and the Biggie Smalls killing?
Well, that's basically what it appears to be, a retaliation. Okay, and I think Suge Knight wanted it to look that way. Okay, but you know, had we been able to aggressively investigate and had the heart to connect the two and do a thorough investigation, I think we probably would have found out more information.
And why didn't you?
Well, you know, there's a lot of factors, but I think the fact that law enforcement officers were working for death row, and that was a scandal in itself, okay? The fact that law enforcement officers were working for gangsters, known felons, basically organized crime, because it was no secret that Death Row Records was involved in drug trafficking.
Between 30 and 40 police officers, some of whom are seen here, worked off duty for death row. Suge Knight had a lot of power, even within the DA's office.
Suge Knight, to me, was one of the most powerful gangsters around. He was well organized. He had a lot of power. And what gave him the power is he had dozens and dozens of police officers working in his organization. Okay. He also had a DA that was working on his
Who was that?
matters. A gentleman by the name of Larry Longo.
Russell believes that Tupac's murder was organized by Suge Knight to look like a gang killing between the Crips and the Pyrus, also known as the Bloods. It was the night of the Tyson fight at the MGM in Las Vegas. Here he is being congratulated by Tupac and Suge Knight. Prior to the fight, Tupac was walking across the casino when one of Suge Knight's Pyru homies whispered into Tupac's ear that a Crip was standing nearby. This Crip, Orlando Anderson, was supposed to have stolen a death row medallion. Tupac, keen to impress, rushed over and punched Orlando Anderson, knocking him to the ground. Suge Knight joined in with the kicking. It was for this kicking, a parole violation, that Suge Knight would receive 9 years in prison. 2 hours later, Tupac would be mortally wounded fighting for his life. Russell thinks Suge Knight staged the whole casino incident.
He thought he would be able to beat this casino probation thing. He really did. It just backfired on him. There's nothing he can do for his defense, because the whole reason for that setup in the casino was to provide a motive, for Compton Crips to do the hit on Tupac, when in fact Suge Knight's people that he hired was going to do the hit. See, it's very smart. I mean, if you study any of these mafia flicks, I mean, it's just perfect.
All right, so I'm going to share with you guys the link to that in the comment section. But I think we should question how Suge Knight got away with a lot of crimes during this time, with pretty much like a slap on the wrist. Now he is getting into more like legal trouble, but I think just during the 90s, what I think is that he was serving a purpose, because I'm about to read to you guys from this book. Again, I interviewed the author, but in chapter 21 of the book, page 169, it says Tupac's conditions in jail. So he went to jail and at the end of 94. He was pretty much there during 95. His conditions in jail. So he was like, it goes over like how he was treated in jail, would further aid to influence Tupac into finally signing with Death Row Records. So it was like a condition that was made. He had to sign with Death Row Records and not go back to who he was with before that, who he was with someone who was like a family friend who also had ties with the Black Panther Party. All right, so Death Row made several attempts to get Tupac to sign with them, but he refused their offers from the years 1993 to 1995. Death Row paid Tupac $200,000 for one song, and both Death Row owners regularly traveled from Los Angeles to visit Tupac in the upstate New York prison where he was being held. Tupac manager Watani Tyahimba couldn't understand why Time Warner Interscope also pushed for Tupac to switch from Interscope to their Death Row subsidiary as early as 93. Tupac finally stopped rejecting Time Warner's request to sign with its subsidiary Death Row after he had spent 10 months in jail. So why was Time Warner so pressed on getting Tupac to sign with Death Row? Like, that's something else that we should be questioning. And then we see again how they were involved in what Beauty Mark was discussing in his TikTok. Tupac, okay, so we read that part. Prior to signing, the appeals court refused Tupac's $1.2 million bail offer for those 10 months that he waited for his appeal trial. But within days of Tupac's September of 1995 signing with Death Row Records, the Court of Appeals accepted a virtually identical bail offer and released Tupac. Death Row claimed to solely provide the bail money to this time, though writers and Interscope/Time Warner actually did so. Few besides U.S. intelligence could influence the Court of Appeals. Other findings further support the notion that Death Row Records Dual Leaf worked as a front company for various U.S. intelligence operations. A Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Gary Webb was the first to link Death Row Records to the CIA from the record company's inception. Webb quoted the probation officer of National Crack Trafficker Freeway, Ricky Ross. So Rick Ross is a real person. The Rick Ross, the artist, took this real Rick Ross's name. That probation officer cited a silent partner of Death Row, a Michael Harrio Harris, as one of Ross's two understudies. The New Yorker magazine and other media outlets described how Vice President George Bush helped run key components of CIA/Contra/crack operations with CIA Director William Casey. Webb detailed the CIA cocaine trafficking network that went from Nicaraguan Contras, such as Danilo Blandon, to Freeway Ricky Ross. A CIA Inspector General backed these findings about the CIA trafficking cocaine in 1998. Webb claimed that Ross was their national point man, trafficking multi-million-dollar cocaine shipments across America. This would have made Michael Harris and Death Row Records important assets for the intelligence community. Evidence suggests that Ricky Ross worked closely with CIA collaborating cocaine traffickers such as Danilo Blandin and Ron Lister in the 80s. Also at the time, Lister met regularly with former CIA Covert Operations Director Bill Nelson, who had worked under George H.W. Bush at the CIA. As Vice President Bush appeared to renew his relationship when researchers say he also oversaw the National Security Council, which supervises the CIA. This became the Iran-Contra crack scandal of the 80s that involved illegal arms sales to Iran, as well as drug trafficking, to illegally provide funds to the Nicaraguan Contras. The Contras tried to overthrow the socialist Sandinistas that had usurped the Nicaraguan government in 1979 from a US-backed brutal dictator and then won an 84 election. US Congress held hearings investigating Reagan-Bush officials and CIA-linked associates indicated on drug trafficking, murder, and related charges. Some were convicted by Bush, pardoned many others as president from 88 to 92. Retired Navy Lieutenant Commander Al Martin, who worked in the Office of Naval Intelligence, blew the whistle on Iran-Contra. Martin detailed how Bush Sr. oversaw most of these operations before Bush Jr. nominated Iran-Contra co-conspirator Robert Gates to Secretary of Defense. On further note, death row silent partner Michael Harris worked with Ricky Ross in the CIA supplied network on the West Coast reflected a similar CIA cocaine network on the East Coast, which affected Afeni Shakur's life. Afeni Shakur was Tupac's mom, who became a crack addict when she was raising Tupac when he was a child. The primary owner of Death Row Records was attorney Dave Kenner. He represented drug kingpin Harris Kenner. Represented drug kingpin Harris. Kenner introduced Harris to Death Row's managing partial owner, Suge Knight. Kenner then created a shell company with oversight ownership to gain ultimate control. As previously detailed, a member of the crack-dealing East Coast network also appeared to do undercover work against the Shakur family. Ken, like Saunders, got close to Afeni Shakur and may have sabotaged her life by repeatedly pushing crack on her in the 80s. This bore a striking similarity to the way Kenner got close to Afeni's son Tupac and subsequently manipulated him. Also, the insertion of a spy as an activist entertainer's manager had at least one historical precedent, with CIA spy J. Richard Kennedy becoming a manager for activist entertainer Harry Belafonte. So then it goes on to talk about the detective Russell Poole. So that's the guy who we just saw in that documentary called Biggie and Tupac. I'm just going to show it on the screen again. This documentary right here. All right. It goes on to talk more about that detective. He was looking into the crimes that Death Row Records was committing. So Suge Knight's apparent police intelligence collaboration likely started around 1990, as seen in his 11 guilty pleas from 1990 to 1995, mostly on violent charges, without the authorities ever revealing he violated his earlier probation. In 1990, a judge had issued him a 2-year suspended sentence and 3-year probation for felony assault with a deadly weapon. Knight pled guilty to at least 5 more criminal charges within the next 2 years, but he never spent a day in jail during that time. So between those times, between 1990 to 1995, Suge Knight never spent a day in jail despite committing these crimes. So we should be questioning that. Why did he get away with it? So in 1993 to 1995, Knight violently assaulted people many times without police charging him with a crime. For example, a security guard said Knight pounded him at musician Prince's Glam Slam Club, causing spleen injuries that required multiple surgeries in 1993. Witnesses said Knight got into a shootout at the same club and beat up a music promoter inside the club 7 months later. As previously noted, intelligence used the tactic of recruiting someone facing jail time to acquire agent infiltrators against the Panthers, such as one recruited in 1968 and used against Fred Hampton's Panthers in Chicago. So the author draws a lot of parallels with what was going on in the 1990s in hip hop with what happened with the Black Panthers in the 1970s. There was a beef that occurred that was instigated by a lot of agents. They instigated a conflict between the East Coast Black Panthers and the West Coast Black Panthers. And there was a lot of miscommunication that was occurring between those two groups of Black Panther members. And they did something similar with Tupac and Biggie. Like when Tupac was in jail, there were people there that were convincing him that Biggie knew about his attack, about Tupac's attack that happened in New York. And that's why Tupac didn't trust Biggie. I'm just gonna, so yeah, so pretty much like Tupac was separated from his former manager, Watani Tiahimba, so that he can be in Death Row Records. And while Tupac was in Death Row Records, Suge Knight was an influence on him to give Tupac like more weed, more more alcohol. And that's why for his first album under Death Row Records, All Eyes on Me, it was mainly about like partying, about the gangster life, which gangster rap, it paints a picture of what it's like in like the ghetto, right? It can serve a purpose of raising awareness of like what it's like there, what's the mentality of these people. However, if you are isolating that from conscious hip hop, from talking about history, from talking about awareness, then it almost becomes glamorizing that lifestyle. So the amount of political messaging that was in All Eyes on Me in 1996 was very, very minimum compared to his previous albums that Tupac had. So when Tupac wanted to get away from Suge Knight, and he wanted to distance himself from Death Row Records, his Machiavelli album, The 7 Day Theory, he goes back to his political roots, and that's where he starts talking about he was sampling Malcolm X speeches. He had songs like White Man's World, and he started going back to his political roots in that album. So, I mean, we should take that into account when we're questioning like what happened to him, right? What happened to Tupac? All right, so I'm going to share with you guys something else. All right, so I got another video for you guys that I did. Now that more of us are starting to become more aware about how questionable the music industry is, should we start questioning some of the mainstream artists that the music industry pushes? Aside from changing the music frequency from 432 hertz to 440 hertz, which 440 hertz is known to shut down the right side part of the brain, which has to do with creativity, the complexity and the creativity of music should also be called into question. This is a study that was conducted in 2012 by the Spanish National Research Council, which analyzed music between 1955 to 2010. And what it found is that there was less variety in the sound characteristics of modern music compared to music from earlier years. This means that songs from more recent years tend to sound more similar to each other with less uniqueness in the way that they sound. This isn't to say that you can't find good quality music. It's just harder to find. Like, it's not pushed by the music industry. And based on who's in control of the music industry, if we think about what their political motives are and their agendas, I think that we should call into question why they're okay with certain artists. If you know, you know. And that's all I'm going to say to end this video. Yeah, so I did that video today. As you can see, I'm wearing the same thing. But also, I had more stuff in that video that I had to take out because TikTok didn't want to like promote it or share it to people's For You page. And that's where I talked about it here in this video about Jimi Hendrix, Tupac. But it's more than just like the political aspect of the music industry. Like there's also like the creativity aspect of it. Like mainstream music, it's bad. Like, and it's shown scientifically as well, as I discussed in that video. My cat's trying to get into the room. I don't know if you guys can hear the door. So this is the study I was talking about in that TikTok. So measuring the evolution of contemporary Western pop music. All right, so it was measuring like the timbre and showing how music is very similar to one another now. Like mainstream music, at the very least, is very similar. There's not much uniqueness. And when you compare it to earlier years, like from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, music was more unique. It was more complex music. This video here goes into it a bit, so I'm gonna share real quick. This video here, this is where I found out about that article. It's by Thoughty2. This was posted 6 years ago. And I'm just gonna watch a little bit of it to show you guys. I'm just looking for the right scene to show to start the video with. I guess we can start here.
This is why I stopped shopping on Amazon. You should too. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this first. Watch this.
Considered as progressive by some people. But in truth, it sucks the creativity and originality out of music, making everything sound somewhat similar. Do you ever flick through the radio and think to yourself, all these songs sound the same? Well, what the researchers found is that the melodies, rhythms, and even the vocals of popular music have become more and more similar to each other since the 60s. One facet of this homogenization of popular music was pointed out by musical blogger Patrick Metzger. Metzger noticed that hundreds of pop artists were using the exact same sequence of notes, in which there's a shift from the 5th note in a scale to the 3rd note, and then back to the 5th. This sequence of notes is usually accompanied by a vocal wah-oh pattern. Metzger named this the millennial whoop. And it
I'm sure we've all heard this. Right?
Whoa, 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 whoa. The millennial whoop can be found in hundreds of chart-topping pop songs created over the past few years, and its usage is becoming more frequent all the time. From Katy Perry's California Girls to Justin Bieber's Baby, literally every single major pop star today has included the millennial whoop in at least one of their songs. But why? Well, quite simply, familiarity. Our brain likes familiarity. The more we hear the same sounds, the more we enjoy them. The millennial whoop has become a powerful and predictable way to subconsciously say to the masses, hey, listen to this new song, it's really cool. But don't worry, you will like it because it's also really familiar, because you've actually heard it hundreds of times before. And in this wildly unpredictable world, this makes us feel safe. Sticking to the same cookie-cutter formula comforts people, and that's important. But what about lyrics? Well, I'm afraid it's bad news there too. Another study examined the so-called lyric intelligence of hundreds of Billboard chart-topping songs over the past 10 years. They use different metrics, such as the Fleischer-Kincaid Readability Index, which indicates how difficult a piece of text is to understand and the quality of the writing. This was the result. Over the past 10 years, the average lyric intelligence has dropped by a full grade. Lyrics are also getting shorter and tend to repeat the same words more often. We've gone from the absolute poetic beauty of Bob Dylan and Morrissey to, well, this and this. What if I also told you that the vast majority of chart-topping music in the past 20 years was written by just 2 people? What do Britney Spears, Taylor Swift, Ellie Goulding, Robin Thicke, Jessie J, Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, Ariana Grande, Justin Timberlake, Maroon 5, Pink, Leona Lewis, Avril Lavigne, Christina Aguilera, Kesha, the Backstreet Boys, Westlife, NSYNC, Adam Lambert, and Will I
pretty much
Am
all of mainstream
all
music.
have in common? The answer, their songwriter. I'm not saying 100% of their songs, but a good chunk of all these artists' songs were written by the same Swedish man, a Mr. Max Martin. This one man is single-handedly responsible for over 24 number-1 singles and thousands of songs in the top 100 charts over the past decades. He has written universally recognizable tracks such as I Kissed a Girl, Baby One More Time, Since You Been Gone, California Girls, Shake It Off, and so many more. And if Max Martin didn't write it, then American singer-songwriter Lucas Gottwald most probably did. Known professionally as Dr. Luke.
Right. So yeah, it goes over like how they use the same writers. Then it goes over how they cheapen like the quality of the music by amplifying the sounds pretty much. Whereas older songs from like the 70s and 60s would lower certain instrument volumes, whereas others were higher. But with modern songs, it's all like at the same volume, all instruments. But I wanted to show you guys a part here about how hits are kind of like manufactured. Like the record companies purposely pay to have songs pushed out on radio stations so they can be played over and over again, so that people are forced to like it. The more that they hear it, the more that they will like the song, due to a phenomenon known as the mere exposure effect. So yeah,
more music. There was just no room for sloppiness or the untalented.
Yeah, so they don't want to take risk with new talent. So that's why they go with safe bets. And oftentimes they also choose like people who are already famous, like TV stars who happen to know how to sing and are already popular with certain audiences. They really invest in their music career, right? Selena Gomez, Ariana Grande, those are examples right there. Miley Cyrus, right? Who came from Hannah Montana. Like they were TV stars first. Yeah, you pretty much get the gist of it. Like
3 million.
You can watch the video, but it pretty much just goes more into depth with what I just said. All right, guys. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I have for you guys for today. But again, I'm not promoting any theories here. I'm just saying we should be questioning all this stuff. Hello? Can you guys still see me? Oh, God. My video was taken down. So I'm on Rockfin currently. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, YouTube crashed. They took my video down. Oh, wait. Am I on YouTube? I see Warren commenting on YouTube. That was so freaking strange. I don't know what's gonna happen in this video, but like it was down just now. I don't have Rumble, unfortunately. I don't know if I should get one, but I am on Rockfin, and I'm gonna share the link to Rockfin. All right, so just bear with me as I copy the link. That's so weird. I'm really think that this is going to be taken down, just like how that one TikTok got taken down saying that I was promoting conspiracy theories. I'm not promoting any conspiracy theories. I'm sharing with you guys information that is shared in books, that's documented, and also sharing with you guys information from articles and saying we should all be questioning this stuff. At minimum, I'm saying I think that some of this stuff is connected, but me saying I think isn't saying that, oh, this is like for a fact what's happening. Oh, I'm already demonetized, doesn't exist. But I guess we can end the video there. I don't have really much else to say, but it was good seeing you guys. All right, stay informed, everybody. Take care. Thank you guys all for pulling up. Doesn't exist, Thomas, Oklahoma, Extra Bulla, Jeremy Jenkins, Rondo, Black Uni Griffin. Thank you guys very much for stopping by. Peace.